All good? I'll keep my phone on. My mother is 84 and she likes to Skype me. So as a good Asian son, I told her I'll always be ready for a Skype call. So if she does call, she sometimes calls during my speeches, I have to take the call. So apologies. I want to talk about skills for the future, and the main metaphor is how well do you get along with your robot? And we'll talk a bit about that. Now, my work in foresight is thinking through the long term. I think about 10, 15 years ago, the European Commission had Universities of Tomorrow project. And they invited 3 of us with almost all the European vice chancellors for 2 days to think about the future of the university. And most of the European vice chancellors said, interesting, but really we've been doing this for 1,000 years, we don't need help. The Malaysian vice chancellor, he said, aha, perhaps we can leapfrog the Western model. So he went back and said, can we work on Malaysian universities? And we did. And because they were doing futures, foresight scenarios, the Malaysian Ministry of Education said, you're now going to be the apex university. So among the ideas that came out is, we will make our new metaphor the garden university. Not the factory, but the garden university. And the way professors get salaries increased is by doing research on the bottom billion. So we're going to do different things, new things in different ways. So that's essentially futures. But when you're in the process of trying to convince ministries, corporations, NGOs, children, how to think about the future, it can be difficult. Most people go to zero loop, meaning we give them data, they have no interest. When you make the argument, they argue even more with you. And because they're too busy on the present, they're unable to innovate. That's slightly funny, you should be laughing. It's okay you didn't. Single loop is what corporations want. What do we do tomorrow? Give us the new idea. That's okay when the future is stable. As the previous speaker spoke, it's not stable, there's dramatic changes. So our big fear for most corporations is being Kodak. What works today doesn't work in the future, and almost every speaker in the last 2 days has spoken on that. So what do? So foresight is a learning journey. Futures is a learning journey. You want to do double loop learning. What don't I know? What makes me anxious? What's difficult? What does that tell me about me? And the challenge we get is most people only accept quantitative data that fits their metaphor. Look, lady, you're the one who asked for a famous movie star with dark hair, strong nose, and deep-set eyes. She didn't get the baby she wanted. So there's a problem of worldview of communication. So what we try to do is do what's called narrative foresight. Think about the future by finding out, is my story working? What's a better story? What's a better metaphor? So many ministries I work with, one ministry, they came up with this amazing vision. 24 all the time learning, unbundled from time, learning from everywhere, child-centered, fantastic vision. I said, this is great. Then I asked them the next question, what's your metaphor of the future? They said, we're in a castle surrounded by hungry wolves. I said, what do you mean? Well, there's a minister, the deputy director, and the principals. We're all the knights, king, queen. I said, great, but there's hungry wolves outside. I said, who are they? Parents, teachers, students, media. Conclusion, great vision. Their risk profile is they won't make a difference. So consistently, we see story overwhelms data. So when I ask groups, what do? How do you change your story? Some groups say, kill the wolf pack leader. Put down the garbage. Make your ministry transparent. Invite the wolves in the castle. Create a playground. Make the wolves huskies towards your 2030 goal. So the suggestion is you have to think, my metaphor today is true, but it's not working. What do we do differently? So for example, one ministry in one prime minister's office in Asia, we were asking them, what is their foresight process? So they told us the things we were doing. I said, okay, what's your metaphor? They said, aha, we're in an ivory tower. So what does that mean? You're not connecting with citizens, with the other ministries. You're just waiting for a prime minister to tell you what to do. So what's a better metaphor? She said, Rapunzel. She's going to leave the castle slowly and grow her hair. What does that mean strategically is, one, you work on action learning projects. You work with the ministries. You work with high school students. So you do things different now that you have your new metaphor. Now, why does this work? Very good quantitative data on metaphors and crime suggests If you have two groups of people, you give them data on crime in their neighborhood, but you change the metaphor, the policy recommendation shifts. If you say crime is a beast, they'll say put money in catching, jailing criminals. If you say crime is a virus, put money in education. So the way you frame your argument about the future is decisive in terms of what happens. So it's not just quantitative data or trends, it's how we make the change through story. So why is this so difficult? One, people have strange stories, and two, there's a weight of history in education. So when we think about the future of education, if we want unbundled space-time person-based, but the model is the factory. We go from factory, school is the factory, new technology comes in, there's still the suicidal teacher in the back. No one's having fun, no one's learning. And this goes back to imaginations of the future even 100 years ago. Students are empty, you just take professors' books and you fill them. So there's no digital pedagogical change. In Australia, for example, 10 years ago, they said, we need to catch up with South Korea. We need to catch up to Japan. What do? Knowledge revolution. What does that mean? Give a computer for every child. Now, when we did that, they said, can you please see what's going on with the principals? As we did the research, it became very clear. Principals didn't want the change. They just wanted a technical response. They were unable to adapt. And then we said, why? Those of you at KAIST KDI, you would have seen my methodology, CLA, causal analysis. We found the stakeholders saw the issue differently. The principals, their story was, I'm in charge. If you bring in a computer, I'm going to sabotage. The ministry said computers are the solution, technology is the silver bullet. The teachers, they said, what about us? We make the difference. It's not just computers. The story we want to create is we're all learners, an ecology of learning. So principals had to move from I'm in charge to we're all learners. That's a narrative shift, which then allows technology to be useful. Otherwise, the technology is banal. It makes no difference. It's actually useless. So this means we have to change the story and change the data. If you want pedestrian, you change the rules, you change the frame. In this classroom, everyone is a student, everyone is a teacher. Now the challenge is our brains are wired for the past. Good brain science research suggests if you show novelty, a different future, the part of the brain that's used to understand the future is related to the past. So your brain is unable to see the future. You go back to what's comfortable. So we make learning embodied learning, immersive learning. You actually experience through role-playing that new future. You have to experience it. It can't be just cognitive. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what you say, the minister, the teacher, the principal, the students will go to their old model, the factory, the brain used to the past. But we are in a situation of change. My own teacher, who I studied with, his view was we've entered a period of galloping time, the Indian philosopher Sarkar. Galloping time creates anxiety, creates fear, creates uncertainty, but you have exponential influence and impact. Once you have plastic time where power is shifting, then your influence is much greater because things are unstable. You're in a complex, chaotic system. We've entered that system in everywhere. The methodology we use is Graham Molitor. Everyone now steals his work, weak signals, black swans. But essentially, he said, we can look at the seeds of change and move from problems to trends to emerging issues. So what are some of those? One is you are the maker, the 3D printed revolution, 3D printed food. So we have, for example, one student, they saw one of their students in class didn't have a hand, they went and printed him a hand. Another student needed braces, so he just printed his braces. China now has the first vertebrae parts printed. At QUT in Australia, they have biofabrication. The second, of course, we've seen the last 2 days, whether for fintech, is peer-to-peer, from Encyclopedia Britannica to peer-to-peer. When I was asking students in Singapore, how many have heard of Encyclopedia Britannica, the 14-year-old student said, sir, we've heard of the country. So they've already shifted to the Wikipedia model, the professors haven't. So that starts to move towards peer-to-peer learning. Now what does that mean? When my own daughter was in high school, she was doing really well, but had problems in business. So I said, can we have a meeting? So I met with the business teacher and my daughter, and we met, and she said she'll be good, she just has to follow the textbook. And I remember the look in her eyes. She just raised her eyes as a good teenager would. So in the car, I said, so can you follow the textbook? And my daughter said, can't you see, Dad? That teacher is crazy. I go, what do you mean? Who reads textbooks? I said, how do you learn? We do peer-to-peer learning. We do Khan Academy. Then we learn from each other. Textbooks are if you really don't know what's happening. So then I called my son, and through Skype, he was in Barcelona. I said, did you have textbooks? He said, I heard there were some. So this is this transition to a new type of learning. So we see this waves of change in business as well. Capitalism is inefficient, so you get new efficiencies through Airbnb, Uber, etc., but the profits still go up. The profits don't stay with the people. So the big breakthrough is cooperative efficiency, meaning we create platforms where the profits stay with the people, so you get incredible hyper-productivity. You get more productivity, you get more ownership. In that sense, it collapses capitalism. Because capitalism creates inequity. This creates productivity and inclusion. That's the next wave globally. Now, these examples I use, why do they work? Why do they carry the shift? The stories work. You go from passive, someone's doing something to you, to active. Hierarchy, the minister knows, to we know. Few involved, to many engaged. So in the Islamic world, the metaphor of education was, it's an arranged marriage. The new metaphor is a love marriage. You decide. The old metaphor was the English tea garden. Manicured, controlled, the professor controls it, etc. The new one, it's a public park. It's messy, it's difficult, but the educational outcomes can be quite profound. So what should we do? Exponential change. What do we do in this world? Well, the simple thing is to slow down. So if you slow down, you slow your breath, you become mindful. As the world changes, you find your moment where everything is slow, everything is present. So the research on meditation for education is brilliant. For health, it's brilliant. There's 42% less hospital resource use. If you have a hospital, your savings are 42%. So we see consistently as the future changes dramatically, anxiety goes up. You want people to slow down so they can speed up as appropriate. Otherwise, we know we'll see dramatically increases rate of mental illness. We're seeing that everywhere globally. Those will just keep on increasing. Now, let me give you more examples of this change. Our previous speaker talked about the end of jobs, right? And we see data, World Economic Forum, many groups saying the jobs we expect to be there the next few years may not be there. Young people have multiple jobs, and they're chasing careers that don't exist. Now, that's okay, except at the same time, in Southeast Asia, ILO says up to 90% of workers in Southeast Asia are likely to be unemployed as the corporations move back home. Siemens, Nike, etc. They're not going to be there. Adidas. So you're in a situation where there's less jobs, and what provided the growth, the East Asian miracle, may disappear. Now, what's worse is 1 billion are about to enter the labor force by 2030. So this creates a Marxian Hegelian dialectic. You have a major disruptive tension between the need for jobs and jobs disappearing at a massive scale globally. And that's the next part, AI delinks work. You won't need work anymore, the great delink. So what do? Work we've done with ministries around the world in multiple countries, from South Africa to Australia to Malaysia. We presented at KAIST a few months ago here. We looked at, well, what are the scenarios? We don't know the future, but we can look at alternative futures. Scenario one is we're teaching and training for jobs that no longer exist. Most educational systems are doing that. One job, one career. That doesn't work anymore. Scenario two is adaptive change. Let's look at Graham Molitor's work from the 50s. What's changing? Robotics, bioinformatics, peer-to-peer, meditation, spirituality, care for the aged, 3D printing. And of course, the metaphor is, how well do you get along with your robot? For example, my wife, she fights with Windows and her iPhone all day. She has a long-standing fight with technology. So in this future, she won't do well. She's in a battle with technology. This is saying, no, how do you make friends with new technology? How do you create a different type of relationship? So this means we're going from the industrial factory to you create your own factory. The customer co-creates. It becomes a partnership model. For that, the minister has to reduce ownership. The teachers have to reduce ownership. It's a different way of thinking. It enhances choice. It could be from the factory to the smart shopping center. So the new metaphor for education has to shift quite dramatically. When we ran this in Malaysia using CLA causal alert analysis, we said the current system is lecture, exam, force feed. Is that working? No, that's not working. The new one, what students want, edX was talking about, eat all you can. You learn from everywhere. Professor said we want smart pedagogy, we want blended omnivore. Now, what does the ministry want? They're real important stakeholders in this. They said, well, we don't want a system where our students are eating all you can. Our parents are influencing us. Parents remember the good old days. We have multiple stakeholders. We can't make this jump without including everyone. Their metaphor was nutritious buffet. We will not allow our students to have junk. McDonald's, Coca-Cola, French fries. We want healthy food, some choice, some prescriptions by the ministry. Here's what could work. Now, edX is going the next level, but in Asia, that may be too far. So nutritious buffet became the metaphor. At the same time, Futures is about the outlier. What's different? What's unique? There was this woman, she posted during the Pokemon Go craze, professional Pokemon Go trainer, $20 an hour. I was intrigued by her. She figured out in the disruption what's different, what's unique. So she became her brand. So you may have models, but the differentiation in a global, flatter world, what makes you different? So this is the radical change. Teach and train for a world after jobs. This is post-scarcity, collaborative, efficient, and you need a guaranteed income globally. This is 2040, 2050. Intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, what I call metaphorically the Sanskrit word prama. If you know complexity, prama means a dynamic balance. Equilibrium, disequilibrium, and complexity, chaos, moving into the future. No longer the factory stable system, but this new dynamic system where you're balanced and you're moving. It's a very different way of seeing the future. Now, when you present this, well, the minister says, so you want me to get elected on a platform of, I promise you no jobs. Which minister is going to win? No one, right? It's not going to work. So let's think of horizons. The short-term horizon is more jobs through increased equity, a fairer global local system, 3D printing, platform cooperatives. People own the system. That's short-term. Medium-term is this shift to multiple jobs. Economic, social entrepreneurs, the end of the factory. Long-term is, of course, the end of the job, automated factories. So this Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, that's something professors, students, ministries can get their head around. That's a step. Here's what I do today. Here's what I do in 2025. Here's what I do in 2030. So they're not so afraid. Because if the minister gets afraid, the CEO gets afraid, the prime minister gets afraid, the foresight project stops, we don't get innovation. We get what's called the official papers. With one ministry, they loved the workshop. They said, now can you give us the paper? I gave him the 60-page paper with all the recommendations. The minister took 9 months. He cut out all the recommendations and just said we had a workshop. We couldn't convince him to be part of the change. He got nervous. So we're always trying to find ways to get people to jump from today to tomorrow. So I want to close on Nelson Mandela. Now, there's many people who say it always seems impossible until it's done. But remember, he said in the 50s he would be the first black president of South Africa. And he spent 30, 40 years in jail. So when someone goes through that experience, his words have some gravity. He saw the change. He saw the shift. He made it happen. Now, many of you are educators here. What should we do? There's so many things you can do. Again, let me go back to my own teacher, the Indian philosopher Sarkar. He said it's very simple. The flame of a lamp lights up countless other lamps. The touch of a great personality wakes up innumerable sleeping hearts. Your role is just to continue this process of transforming the world person by person and finding good systems who can make it possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sohail. I think you have provided very interesting insights on the radical change in education from